So you have those 7 chakras, and they each have their meaning. And I want to go with you in depth to the first chakra, the Muladhara chakra, and the root. But can you tell shortly what are chakras?
So chakras are meridian points in the subtle body where the different nadis, which are the like the veins of Shakti in the body, the channels of Shakti in the body, where they intersect, they create these meridians. And it's a place where Ida and Pingala are intersecting. Ida is the mental power, the mental conduit of Manas Shakti, and Pingala is the pranic conduit, Prana Shakti, right? So we have vital energy of the body's energy, and the mind's energy. And where these cross, they create chakras. So chakra, therefore, implies both energy and mind. So it's a dimension of the mind. It's a level of the mind, an energetic level of the mind at different frequencies. So the lower frequencies are the lower chakras, and the higher frequencies are the higher chakras. And at the lowest, we have Muladhara. And this has to do with instinct. The lower 2 chakras actually have to do with the instinctive intelligence of survival and reproduction. And then the middle 2 chakras, this is now the intuitive level of intelligence. The mind has taken on a higher quality than just instinct, and there's intuition. So we have the gut, Manipura, and we have the heart, Anahat. Both your gut instinct and your heart, these both have to do with instinctive level of intelligence. And then the upper 2 also form a pair for the intellectual form of intelligence. So we have these 3 types of intelligence. We have instinctive intelligence, lower 2 chakras, intellectual intelligence, middle 2 chakras, and intellectual intelligence, the upper 2 chakras. And so Vishuddhi has to do with communication, and Agya has to do with awareness. And then we can see this also corresponds to the 3 states of mind, and the 4th beyond them, the Turiya, pure consciousness, is Sahasrara. So we have Jagrat, Swapna, Sushupti, and Turiya. We have the waking state and physical body, instinct. We have the dreaming state, the subtle body, the dreaming state, subtle body, the subtle dimension of the Sukshma, which are the middle 2 chakras. And then finally, we have Sushupti, the 3rd state, the unconscious mind, the Sattvic, which corresponds to Vishuddhi and Agya. So we have Tamasic, Rajasic, Sattvic, Trigunatita. And we have the 3 states of mind and the 4th, pure consciousness as well. All of this Vedic knowledge is contained in the chakras.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And when we go into the root chakra of Muladhara.
So Muladhara here is where the Kundalini is awakened from. The Kundalini is dormant at Muladhara. Muladhara is the instinct center. It is the highest state of the instinct. So animals, for example, their highest chakra, their crown chakra, is actually Muladhara. This is what Swami Satyananda has told us. So that is to say that the animal kingdom, their whole purpose is to master instinct. And then once in that Atman, once in that soul, that Jivanatma, once that it has mastered the instinctive intelligence, then you go on to a higher form of life, such as a human life, where you can begin to master the intuitive and the intellectual dimensions of intelligence. But it all begins from Muladhara. This is where the Kundalini Shakti is sleeping at. The slumber of the Shakti is here at Muladhara.
You actually say ascent and descent, or descent, ascent.
Yes, so it ascends. It ascends from Kundalini.
It ascends.
The Kundalini ascends from Muladhara, is what I mean to say. Yes.
Yeah.
And so here at Malila has prepared these slides with all sorts of beautiful information for you. But what I would really like to communicate and share with your listeners so they can understand the role of Muladhara in Kundalini awakening is this is the center of fear and trust. So when we have excessive fear, then the Kundalini cannot even awaken because Muladhara is going to be shut tight. It's going to be closed. As long as Muladhara is closed, it is not active, then the Kundalini will remain dormant. And spiritual life is mostly just an intellectual head trip. We don't really have profound inner experiences until the Kundalini is awakened. So fear keeps the Shakti dormant. Fear keeps our spiritual power, our Kundalini Shakti, in a dormant state. So we must overcome fear. We have to have trust. Trust is what overcomes fear. And so in the beginning, you have to trust in the process. And this is why it helps so much to be a part of some kind of spiritual community, and why it helps to be able to have a predecessor, a mentor, a guru, who you can trust in the process that they're teaching, which is a very ancient technique of Kundalini Yoga or Kundalini Tantra. And the more that we can release fear, the more Shakti we can enjoy. That's a really important message here. And it is also, Rudra Granthi is in Muladhara as well. Yeah. This is the knot of Rudra that is keeping us restricted to our physical attachments. So the more attached we are to physical things, to physical belongings, to survival and reproduction, to these main aspects of the instinctive intelligence, the more attached we are to those things, the more restricted the knot of Brahma is in Muladhara, and the less Kundalini Shakti we have active.
Yeah, and yeah, it's also seeking outside, the outside world, and seeking there and looking how to satisfy, the outer world. It's more about going inward to your, to yourself.
Yes.
And have that inner growth within yourself, because that outer world always is changing. And but the inner self, there you can find that silence, and you have to trust on yourself, on your own, that you have the power within. So that power is within. And when you are looking in the outer world, there will always be things, there always be fears. So it's about go inside and find that inner peace inside, no matter what.
Yes, very good. And until we can find, it's an internal orientation towards desire, an internal orientation towards pleasure, an internal orientation towards fulfillment and gratification, that we have to find that before the Shakti can go any further up to Swadhisthana. So Swadhisthana now is the pleasure center. And as long as we are seeking pleasure outside of ourselves through the objects of the senses, then the Shakti is not going to be able to ascend from Muladhara, right? It's going to go back into a dormant state. In order for the Shakti to go through the center pathway of Shushumna Nadi, there has to be an internalization of focus. That's actually what Shushumna corresponds to. The more your attention and your focus is internalized and withdrawn into yourself, the more Shushumna becomes active. And when Shushumna is fully active is when you have transcended duality, the external world of name and form, and you are totally internalized. You're experiencing that bliss within your own heart. So when we are in an external orientation towards the world through duality, then Pingala and Ida are dominant, are active. But when you become withdrawn, when you become internalized, when you withdraw your focus within towards the spirit, towards spiritual life, then Shushumna Nadi, the internal, the middle pathway through the spine becomes active. And Kundalini actually corresponds to that. It's all your same power. We can call it Atma Shakti. Your own spiritual power is manifesting. When your spiritual power is in an externalized mode, going out through the five senses, this is ego, ahamkara. Your Shakti is in the mode of ego, ahamkara. But when your same Shakti, your same spiritual power is internalized within, towards spirit, towards Shiva, towards God, that is Kundalini. Same energy. In an externalized mode, it's ahamkara. In an internalized mode, it's Kundalini. Mm-hmm. And so before we can ascend any further from Muladhara, we have to have this internalized orientation towards desire. And so what does that mean? Ultimately, what that means is that you are committed towards experiencing that more fulfilling bliss, ecstasy, joy, love, which are actually qualities of your own self. These are eternal qualities. These are eternal principles that are true, meaning that they are qualities of your own eternal, infinite Atman. Joy, peace, bliss, love. These are your own qualities, and they are not the qualities of the objects of the senses. Yes, certain objects of the senses, a morsel of chocolate, indeed, it is sweet. There's no question about it. A perfume or a rose, it is aromatic, absolutely. And satin or silk is soft and caresses the skin, no question about it. But contentment, bliss, joy, love, these are aspects of yourself, not the objects of the senses. And so yoga and tantra, all this is returning you to this higher awareness. And then when you know that actually what I'm seeking here, when I pick up this little morsel of chocolate, it's actually that internal experience of bliss and joy and ecstasy. And therefore, I can take a moment when I indulge. I don't have to say, oh, I'm not going to indulge. No, I can take this morsel of chocolate and I can just very quietly silence my mind and allow this to be a catalyst, allow this to be a vehicle for experiencing bliss in this present moment. Because when the senses are satisfied, the mind becomes satisfied for a very brief moment. The mind is never truly satisfied. It just gets a little bit of satisfaction. And in that little satisfaction, the mind becomes silent for a brief moment. Well, you can expand that silence. You can increase that silence. And in that silence, you can experience true joy, true pleasure, true contentment. And the chocolate is just a catalyst or a vehicle for that. Yeah, so all of these are just techniques for helping you to be able to experience your own true nature.
Yeah.
Because when you silence the mind, you're already there. You don't have to recreate anything. You don't have to attain anything. And that bliss is you. I wouldn't even say it's Kundalini. I would not say it's Kundalini. It's just you. It's you. It's who you are. Yeah. Kundalini is that energy that is returning you to yourself. She is the energy that brought you out of pure consciousness, out of the universal consciousness. And she is that energy that is now returning you to that as well.
And what is then the difference between prana or ki or chi, what they use, and Kundalini energy? Is there a difference between prana and the energy of Kundalini? Or is it just the same life force in a different name?
Yeah, we can understand that you have an individual life force and there's also a universal life force. So there's small p prana and then there's big P prana, right? And so your individual life force is finite. We have so much prana, each and every one of us. It's tied to your breath. And we only have so many breaths in this lifetime. When you use the last of your prana, your individual prana, you take your last breath and that's it. Your Atma leaves the body and you go on for a next lifetime. However, the cosmic energy is synonymous with Kundalini. The big P, prana, is Kundalini. We can understand cosmic energy, universal energy, Maha Prana, Kundalini Shakti. These are actually the same thing. And so in that sense, Kundalini Shakti is actually that cosmic energy that is responsible for expanding the whole universe and is actually overseeing, guiding the progress of all evolution in the whole universe, physical, mental, psychic, spiritual. She is the force that is behind everything. Kundalini is in everything. She's not only that creative force, the universal, she's not only that universal force and is creating the whole universe and is responsible for the expansion and evolution of the universe, but she resides within each individual being as your own individual prana as well. So when we can conserve our small p prana, our individual prana, and when we can increase that energy, our own individual energy, to a high enough level where there's this enormous amount of personal energy we have conserved, then that can detonate and that can ignite and it can awaken the cosmic energy, the Kundalini energy. And so now you are experiencing unlimited cosmic energy. You're pulling energy straight from the source. And that's why now you can heal, you can awaken other people's Kundalini with Shaktipat, because you're connected to an infinite cosmic universal source of power. And that's what the Kundalini Shakti is. And it's going to flow through your central channel, through Shushumna, to whatever extent you can release your attachments and surrender. The three main nadis in the human body are Ida, Pingala, and Shushumna. And Ida and Pingala correspond to duality, sun and moon, day and night, positive, negative, man, woman. However, here in specific, it is body and mind. So what are the dualities that are most personal to us? Well, the sun and the moon are external. But to us, most personally, these dualities are body and mind. Body is the solar, mind is the lunar. Body is the masculine, mind is the feminine. So we have an energy for the body and we have an energy for the mind as well. And each of these energies have their own channels or conduits. So the conduit for the physical life force of prana is called Pingala Nadi. And Pingala Nadi, it runs along the right side of the body. And then we also have mental energy. The mental energy is called Manas Shakti. And Manas Shakti flows through the lunar pathway of Ida Nadi. So we have these two forces of duality, sun and moon, physical and mental. So when it comes to the body-mind complex, which is governed by the ego, this is the channels that our spiritual power, our Atma Shakti, is flowing through when we are in an externalized mode of identifying with the body and mind, processing through the senses, an animal, a creature in the world. We are in duality, identifying with being our body and our mind. That is Ida and Pingala. And then Shushumna is the non-dual path. It is when we transcend body-mind awareness and we have spiritual awareness, which is internalized. So let's start with Ida. Ida Nadi is the pathway of the moon. It is described as being the feminine channel, and a more cool lunar energy of Manas Shakti is flowing through Ida. Now, this is the mental power. And the mental power is going to be influenced by the vital power. So let's go now to Pingala. Pingala here is vital energy. Now, the mind is only going to be able to expand itself to the extent that there is energy to fuel it, right? So we have to have that prana. We have to have that energy first to be able to fuel the expansion of the mind. So Ida is going to rely on Pingala. And that's why our focus in yogic practices is actually on Pingala. If you look at the different practices of yoga, it's actually, the focus is not so much on the mind, right? Our objective is definitely, we want to expand the mind. But actually the practice is on increasing energy in the body, improving circulation in the body, improving flow of energy in the body. And then once we have more physical energy or prana, then the mind can expand. And the mind is you're only going to be able to stay at those high levels of awareness that you have energy to fuel, right? So we have to have that high energy, which is why prana becomes such a focus in yogic practices. So prana is described as being more of a warm, bright, brilliant energy, more of a masculine, whereas Ida is a soft, cool. This is more of a warm, brilliant energy. And the objective of Hatha Yoga is to balance these two. Also, Swara Yoga, when these two nadis are perfectly balanced, when you have achieved balance in your life between the body and the mind, between the internal and external, the outer life and the inner life, when you've achieved balance there, then the third pathway overrides the other two. The third pathway is Sushumna. Sushumna Nadi is dormant when we are in an externalized mode. When we are identifying with being the body, mind, the ego complex, processing through the senses, relating to the world and clinging to our false identifications, then Ida and Pingala are dominant. However, when you internalize your awareness, when you withdraw your awareness from the outer senses and you become aware to the internal state, your internal state of being, during meditation, you come into your heart and you transcend the body, mind, ego complex, and you become aware to that higher, aware of that third, that inner state of just pure beingness, pure consciousness, as the seer, as the knower. Then Sushumna is activated and Sushumna begins to flow. And When Shushumna is flowing, cosmic energy is flowing through Shushumna, Kundalini Shakti. Kundalini Shakti flows through Shushumna and purifies all of our psychic impressions, all of our baggage, all of our hangups, all of our desires, all of our mental impressions, mental thought patterns, the modifications of the mind. These are all stored in Shushumna. Your karmas are stored in Shushumna. So when Shushumna awakens and activates and the Kundalini begins to flow, there are two different things that are going to determine the flow of the Kundalini Shakti through Shushumna. How much Kundalini Shakti is flowing through Shushumna? How fast is it going to ascend through the chakras? How quickly is it going to pierce all the chakras and awaken and purify each chakra? That's going to be determined by two things. First of all, it is the karmic impurities in Shushumna. So your past life impressions, also your current life, your desires, your thought patterns, your impressions, all of those things stored in the psyche, whatever you're repressing, whatever is there influencing your behavior unconsciously, all that stuff, memories that you've forgotten about, desires, thought patterns, traumas, all these things, they're all stored in Shushumna. And so that's why when Kundalini is awakened, it begins this purification process, which can sometimes be uncomfortable, because purification is, we all want it, we all want to be purified, but the process of purification is actually very difficult. And so we are encountering our own obstacles when the Kundalini is ascending through Shushumna. Now, the other thing that's going to determine the flow of Kundalini through Shushumna is the Granthis. The Granthis are the knots. They are psychic knots in Shushumna. So you can think of it as like a knot in Shushumna. And we have one at Muladhara called Brahma Granthi. We have one at Anahat called Vishnu Granthi. And we have one at Agya called Rudra Granthi. And these are the different attachments to the world, to society, and to ideas. So your physical attachments to survival and reproduction, to money, and to all of these, to the objects of the senses, all of that, the more attached you are, the more Brahma Granthi is going to be tight. And the tighter Brahma Granthi is, the harder it is for any Shakti to flow beyond Muladhara. So fear, attachment, craving, all these things keeps your Shakti dormant because it doesn't get any further than Muladhara. But when you can release physical attachment, when you can release physical craving, when you can transcend fear by having trust and by internalizing your desire, then it begins to flow up into Swadhisthana through Shushumna, and the next Granthi is at the heart center. When the Shakti comes to the heart, you experience such bliss, such joy, such sweet ecstasy when the Shakti is swimming in the lake of the heart. This is the first time that Shiva and Shakti reunite. Shakti reunites with Shiva at the heart. So everything up until then takes a lot of effort, there's a lot of purification, a lot of surrender that has to happen as you're working with overcoming fear, then craving, then pride. And once you finally get rid of all this fear and craving and pride, then you come to the kingdom of the heart. However, this is also where Vishnu Granthi is located. And you might feel more brotherly love in the beginning, but those attachments, they restrict the Kundalini from being able to flow any further. Because ultimately those attachments are rooted in ignorance, because there's still that sense of separation. We don't understand that you are I, and I am you. What you most essentially are, Atman, Shiva is also what I most essentially am. We are identical in our highest truth. But because we don't know that, we develop these attachments to each other and these social bonds and these social attachments, even if it's rooted in a good intention. You love this other person and you love them so much that it breaks your heart. You feel grief in your heart, right? That grief is restricting the knot of Vishnu. And in order to be able to transcend and go beyond the heart chakra to the higher chakras, we have to release our attachment to social ties. And that doesn't mean loving less, it actually means loving more. Because when you see yourself in others, then that's true love. And you want them to be happy, you want them to be free. You don't want to hold them back, or you don't want to tie them down. You want them to be free. And the heart opens even more. And then the Shakti can ascend. The final Granthi, the final knot, is located in the region of Agya, and it's called Rudra Granthi. And this has to do with our attachment to ideas, to mental conceptualizations. This is being overly attached to the map, overly attached to the model, overly attached to intellectualism, to bookish knowledge. Eventually, all of this theory has to be let go of. All of it, this whole lecture today, all of this yoga, all of this tantra, all of this Vedanta, eventually we transcend it all. And if you can't transcend it, then at a certain point, it actually becomes a barrier. It actually becomes an obstacle. It's like a raft. You use the raft to cross the river, but once you cross the river, you have to let go of the raft. So we're crossing over from our false identifications to becoming fully established in constant awareness to our true nature. And once you've made that transition, once you've crossed over and you have achieved self-recognition, self-realization, then you can leave all the isms behind you. Another analogy is, well, there's my favorite quote is, the map is not the terrain. And the analogy is, you follow the map to get to your destination. But imagine somebody who they use the map to get to Disney World. And once they get to Disney World, they still have the map in front of them. And they're walking around with the map in front of their face. And it's like, oh, look, we're in Disneyland. Everybody, look, now we're here, now we're there. But what they need to do is set down the map. And then you actually can enjoy, arrive at your destination. And until you can set down the map, then you can never truly enjoy your destination. And the spiritual destination is great. Eventually, we have to let go of all these models and to set down the map.
Yeah, but do you then say that you have a past and a future, and Shushumna is the now?
Yes. When we are in the past, we are focusing on our attachments. And when we are in the future, we're focusing on our expectations.
Yeah.
So expectations and attachments is not allowing us to be present in the now, in the sacred now where life is unfolding. And in order to withdraw your awareness within and to internalize your focus, which is Shushumna, you have to be in the moment. You have to be in the now. And as soon as we get caught up in fears, expectations, and attachments, then we're coming back into the duality, the level of duality of the mind and the body. And Ida and Pingala are coming back into action.
Yeah. And when you look to this picture, you also see the earth, water, fire, air, and space. And you have actually the 5 or the Pancha Tattvas. And can you talk with the slide a bit about that?
So part of this philosophy is rooted in Samkhya. In fact, this whole philosophy of the chakras and of ascension and everything is rooted in Samkhya. And Samkhya is Vedic cosmology. It is the theory of evolution. Now, this is not evolution like Darwinian evolution. This is Vedic evolution that says that all life starts off as pure spirit, universal consciousness, and that we descend into the various stages of matter. We come into more dense states of energy and matter from pure spirit until we achieve this individuated state of being in a body with a mind and an ego. And this philosophy tells us that from the most subtle, we come to the most gross. And the final ultimate element is the most gross element of Prithvi, earth. So that is Vedic cosmology. That is Samkhya, which is telling us that everything descends from most subtle to gross. Well, yoga is the path of involution, meaning that we're now going to follow this map back to its source. Starting with the most gross now, we're going to go to the most subtle. So yoga is really putting the philosophy of Samkhya to the test. So we're going to start off with earth. Then the more subtle element is water. Then the more subtle element is fire. Then air. Then ether or space. And yoga is all yogic meditations and even yogic practices. They start with the most gross and then they go to the subtle. So we start with the body, then you go to the breath, then you go to the mind, right? And all yogic meditations, all yogic practices are actually flowing in that way, taking you from gross back to most subtle. And so these tattvas, these elements, they symbolize the pathway back. This is the yogic process where we are going to start off with practices for the body. So you start off doing asanas. And then after you've done asanas for so long, then you're going to start learning pranayama. And then once that you can do pranayama, then you can meditate. Pranayama naturally leads to meditation. So you're going from gross, the body, to subtle, the breath, to causal, the mind. And then when the mind is silent, you can transcend those and experience the fourth state of Turiya. And so this is the path of involution. And this is helping us to be able to withdraw ourselves from the externalized mode of focus on the body to a more subtle internal awareness, to awareness of the causal level of the mind, to awareness of your spiritual truth beyond the mind, breath, and body completely.
Yeah. And it's also in the Om Namah Shivaya that you...
Yeah, exactly. Om Namah Shivaya is a meditation that purifies the 5 elements. It's called the 5-syllabled mantra because Om is not included as a syllable. So it's Namah Shivaya. Na purifies earth. Ma purifies water. Shi purifies fire. Va purifies air. And Ya purifies ether. So when you say Namah Shivaya, you are purifying these tattvas from gross to subtle. So it's not only purifying the elements, but it is more importantly leading you from gross or externalized awareness to subtle or internalized awareness. It's like climbing a mountain or going up the steps of a staircase, or climbing the rungs of a ladder, so that you can go from earth to water, from water to fire, from fire to air to ether, from ether. Finally, the sixth element is mind. From mind, you go to Prakriti. Prakriti leads you back, or Shakti, or cosmic energy. Shakti leads you back to Shiva, pure consciousness. And so this is like the map for yogic meditation.
And thank you so much for the great lecture you gave. Thank you so much.
Thank you as well. It has been a wonderful blessing